Hey there, entrepreneurs. My name is Sushant, and welcome to Trep Talks. This is the show where I interview successful e-commerce entrepreneurs, business executives, and thought leaders, and ask them questions about their business story, and also dive deep into some of the strategies and tactics that they have used to start and grow their businesses. And today, I'm really excited to welcome David Zamarin to the show. David is the founder of DetraPel. DetraPel uses innovative nanotechnology to create liquid repellent sprays that create completely harmless, invisible barriers that protect your items, usually fabric and leather belongings, from damage caused by water, other liquids, and even food. And today I'm going to ask David a few questions about his entrepreneurial journey and some of the strategies and tactics that he has used to start and grow his business. So, David, I really appreciate your time today, and thank you again for joining me at Trip Talks.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
So very interesting business, and you were just chatting, and you said that you started this business when you were just 15. I'm really curious, and seems like it's a pretty successful business. I mean, from based on what I've read. Uh, can you share a little bit about, you know, even at that age, like, are you the sole founder? How did you get the idea? And I mean, how did you get into this specific business?
Yeah, I am a solo founder. The idea came about as it's a funny story. So I've always been an entrepreneurial kid, always was very entrepreneurial minded. And when I was younger, specifically in high school, I got involved with a youth entrepreneurship program that was held outside of my school. And the program pretty much taught young high schoolers or young people in general that starting a business or being an entrepreneur is all about solving problems. And so my problem, of course, as a 14-year-old getting into this program was I hated getting my shoes dirty.
Okay.
And so specifically my Jordans, because they were very expensive. I come from a low income background. So I didn't have money to just constantly buy new pairs of shoes. And so I ended up coming up with this idea of a film that could be peeled off whenever it got dirty. But I didn't know anything about chemistry at the time. So my additional mentors that I had through the program recommended to me that I pivot the idea and start a shoe cleaning business for local university sports teams. I'm sorry,
Hmm.
actually, before that, they recommended that I start cleaning shoes as the business
Hmm.
idea. And at first I was like, I don't want to clean shoes. That's pretty disgusting. But I quickly swallowed the pride and realized that there was something in that business model, specifically as it related to local university sports teams. So I ran my first real business, as I call it, when I was a 14-year-old freshman in high school, specifically cleaning shoes for local university sports teams in the Philadelphia region, which is where I'm from. And so I ran that for about 6 months. That business actually ended up doing pretty well. It was making like 25K a month at the end of it in revenue. And it was all profit because I was the only person in the business and it was just cleaning shoes. It was just service-based, hourly wage essentially was my
Hmm.
only cost. And of course, I didn't have a wage. So
Hmm.
it was a pretty interesting business model, but it wasn't really scalable. And one of the services that we were offering, our conditioning service, was a competitor product to what DetraPel does today, except that product required a full body suit and a respirator mask to apply it. And it also ruined the color and feel of fabrics. It would dry white and hard. And so I ended up getting I ended up ordering a couple samples that never arrived, and it was super expensive. It was like $1,600 for a little quart. And 6 months into that first business, I got an opportunity to sell it. And so when I exited out of the company that summer, transitioning into my sophomore year of high school, I started researching different type of nanotechnology-based repellent products as my film idea. And so I looked at my competitors and I said, I was a naive 14-year-old at the time. So I was just asking silly questions and saying, well, if these guys could do it, why can't we do it in a non-toxic way, or why can't there be a safe version of this type of product? And so that's when I learned about nanotechnology, polymer chemistry, and so on and so forth. And that's the way I initially got the idea. There's a couple of steps that I kind of fast forwarded there, but there's definitely a learning curve that's part of that.
So you started with a problem, which I guess is probably the best way to start a business, to say, and I think, a lot of the people kind of get into this thought process that you must already be an expert in something in order to start a business or something. And what you did is kind of, what Elon Musk calls kind of a first principles thinking, right? You start with a problem, and then you try to figure out what is the best way to solve it. So you're not coming with any preconceptions. You're thinking from like a plain slate, and I think that's probably the best way to do it. So when you came about this idea of nanotechnology, can you share a little bit more on what happened next? Like, of course, you had to come up with a product. Did you work with some lab to come up with the product, do some testing? Like, how did you come up with like your prototype product to
Yeah,
roll this out?
so I didn't use any outside labs in the beginning. Eventually we did, and then that didn't end up working. And eventually we made some breakthroughs when we hired the right people. But before we get to hiring, I started not knowing anything about chemistry. So I was a high school student, running, the business, or starting the business with an idea, with a problem and a potential solution, not knowing how to actually make that solution come to fruition. And so the process at the time really was, I ended up having classes in chemistry as a high school student. And then I was also, like I said, a part-time undergraduate student at the University of Pennsylvania during my evenings. So I would take classes as a pretty much as a regular student, but I was in high school at UPenn. And over the course of the 3 years that I was at Penn, during my high school years, I took a variety of classes, but I also shadowed a researcher and her work, who happened to be one of the leading researchers at the time in nanotechnology in their brand new nanotechnology center that was built like the year prior. And so I ended up just learning about like photocatalytic titania. That was like the first thing I started learning, or when I was Googling, honestly, it was just all Google and YouTube for a long time. And it was just like, okay, well, what is nanotechnology? Okay, well, what is the lotus leaf effect? How does the lotus leaf effect happen? What's the composition of a lotus leaf? So on and so forth. And just asking a million questions to deduce some sort of basic principles. And so once we got those basic principles, I was able to come up with certain things on my own. And then we got some MVP products, which ultimately did not work when trying to scale. And so we had a bunch of R&D challenges for nearly 4 years afterward. And until we were finally at a point we were selling and we were profitable at that point. And so what we really started to do is we started looking at expanding the team. Our first hire related to research was a chemical engineer. And then we had, at the time, it was a consultant for us who now is our CTO, essentially, our Chief Research and Development Officer, who's brilliant and was able to really solidify not only the chemistries behind it, but a whole platform technology that we use today that helps us create many different chemistries, because we don't just do things for textiles.
Okay.
We're much bigger than that, actually.
Okay. So you said that you were in high school and you were taking university classes in the evening.
Yeah.
How did
Yeah.
that work? Well, like, are you kind of like prodigy or something? Like, were you really good?
Hardly. No, I mean, education was always a big focus in my family. So was business, but education was like the primary focus of my upbringing. My parents are both immigrants, constantly pushing me nonstop. And so especially my mom and my mom's side of the family pushing me in education. And I was fortunate. So the reason I got into the youth entrepreneurship program, I was the youngest kid in the program. I was the only non-senior. The reason I even chose to do a program like that was because when I went to a middle school in Philadelphia, that was one of the best schools in the country. And it also has a high school component to it. And so it's called Masterman, and it's the 7th best school in the country. It's a public school, a magnet school. They have to test to get it, but it's not private. And so I was fortunate. I got into the high school. I was there for the middle school and reapplied for the high school and got in. And like I said, it's very, very competitive. Everyone around me was a literal genius. And so when I looked at everyone else, I said, well, how am I going to be different when I apply to colleges? And so the first step for me at that time was I was looking to get involved in extracurricular activities, and I had a passion for business and entrepreneurship. I had other entrepreneurial tendencies and businesses, I put in quotes, as a middle schooler, where I made some money here and there. And so I was just flipping stuff, kind of like the Michael Rubin story, if anyone's familiar with him. I was just flipping stuff as a teenager, and I was making some money, and then eventually got really passionate about entrepreneurship and what it really means to be an entrepreneur. And so I think at some point there, I was always very educationally inclined. And so, yeah, I was taking classes, and that kind of stayed as a theme throughout my entire life so far.
Awesome. So this technology that you said, you're at your university, you kind of shadowed this professor at her nanotechnology lab and things like that. Some of the items or some of the things that you learned, like was there ever any intellectual property related stuff where, was it that, what you're learning at a university, you're kind of commercializing it? Like, was there any conflict there ever? Or this was like a completely new research that was not done anywhere else before, or there was not any similar products in the market, and this was like a completely new product?
Yeah, so it was completely new. My research was my personal research outside
Okay.
of campus, outside of the school. I just happened to, when I say I shadowed, I literally like would read all of her content. I
Okay.
would talk to her, read her content, understand what she was doing. I wasn't like a formal teacher's assistant or anything like that. I didn't do anything like that. So there was no conflict from the beginning because I never did any actual physical research on campus. Um, I just took everything from, what she was doing and just learned from that what it meant to do research in this field. That's what I meant by that. And so, yeah, I mean, for me, I think at the time I was definitely worried about IP. So I was constantly asking about IP laws and how certain programs work, because I was in a lot of incubator or accelerator programs as the company was starting. And so I was very critical of what the IP rights would be. Fortunately for me, there really wasn't any kind of plus on top of that. Well, Penn does take IP ownership. So almost any school will take 100%, 50% ownership of the IP and license it back out to you. That was a no-go for me. So I never even bothered doing any actual physical work on campus, using any of the equipment or anything like that. All I did was find publicly available information and learned like what photocatalytic technology was, and how that was beneficial in certain applications. And so that's what I did.
So I mean, my personal understanding of these kind of products, I have leather shoes, and of course, in living in Canada, there's snow and salt and all these things. So I usually buy like some of these sprays, and I never bother to look into what the composition is and those kind of things. So I do have these sprays that I usually spray on my leather shoes to prevent snow getting into it, and salt affecting it and so forth. How is your product different than what some of these other sprays do that one can easily find on Amazon? Um, what is different about your product? Like why the customer? Why should a customer purchase your product?
So what we do, let me back up. There are technically three distinct brands under the DetraPel umbrella. So there's a consumer brand, which exists because we were a Shark Tank company a few years ago. But the majority of what the business does is our industrial side, where we make coatings. We're a materials company that makes coatings for industry that's used during the manufacturing process, either of textiles or paper and food packaging, which is my largest industry. And then other things like conformal coatings we make as well, which are coatings for PCB boards or other electronics that are used in your laptops, your iPhone, stuff like that. So we make a variety of different coatings, and we always lead with performance. Our number one thing is everything that we make has to be the industry leader in performance. We just so happen to be sustainable second. And so the precipice of the technology, when I first came up with the idea for the business in 2013, we wanted to be obviously very safe, non-toxic, so on and so forth. And at the time, no one was really talking about it, but PFAS chemicals, which are now very well known, were starting to become an issue in both regulatory landscapes and because of litigation. So there was a class action lawsuit against DuPont that got settled in like 2016 for over $5 billion. And then that opened the floodgates for a ton of different litigation. And that's when it really came out that nonstick cookware or Teflon and all these fluoral chemicals or PFAS chemicals were carcinogenic and problematic. And so what we ended up learning during that process was we were PFAS free, we were fluorine free, we were the first ones and really the only ones that flat out said that. But no one really cared about that back then. And still, even to this day, until regulatory tailwinds catch up with companies, they're not necessarily inclined. And that's primarily because the greener you generally go, the worse your performance is, or if you want the same performance, then it costs an arm and a leg. And so, the challenge is with us, we always led with performance. We also happen to be, as sustainable as it gets, as green as it can get. And our challenge has always been that we're the premium product in the market, but we're not for every customer. So we will flat out tell people that if what we're selling doesn't fit their model, doesn't fit budget, whatever, we're not, if they're looking for a cheaper alternative than what they have today, we're not the company for you. But if you want the best performing products, if you want the Ferrari in performance, if you want the best possible, coatings and best possible resistance to oils or stains or whatever it is that you're looking for, moisture barrier, oxygen barrier, you come to us.
Okay. What is the, so you have a consumer business and industrial business. If you were to give like your, if you're let's say selling your product and you have to say, give kind of a case study, you said your product is kind of like the Ferrari, what is it that if I'm using your product versus something else, like, is it like, if once I put your product, it's like, it's full, completely proof, like it doesn't matter what kind of fluid gets on my fabric or shoes, it's completely safe. Is that versus like your competitor? Of course, you said yours is more sustainable also, but in terms of performance, what is the difference we're talking about in performance?
Yeah, so I'll give you a real life example. A tissue, a regular tissue, like a tissue box, right? If you throw that underwater, it'll disintegrate right away.
Yeah.
So why is it that your food packaging, like from Chipotle, Sweet Green, or any paper-based package that you get from takeout or whatever, why is it that that doesn't disintegrate? And the answer is because it has some sort of either polyethylene PE plastic coating or a film, or it has a wax-based coating or something that has fluorochemicals in it. Which obviously the fluorochemicals are carcinogenic. The wax is not preferred in the industry, and PE is getting banned left and right too because it's plastic. So if you want to move to something more sustainable, if you want to move to paper products and make paper do things that it cannot do before, you need a coating. When you think about a Chipotle bowl, for example, right, which is a fluorochemical, it's typically considered like the best of the best in performance is typically what you get with fluorochemicals, but they're carcinogenic. And so if you look at a Chipotle bowl, that will last in the presence of oil and grease for about 30 to 45 minutes before it starts to disintegrate, which eventually will have your bowl fall apart. And also, most importantly, it affects the customer experience for a number of reasons. One, because the staining doesn't look good, but functionally, the reason why companies don't want staining in their packaging is because staining means that oils are getting through, which affects the organoleptics of the food, which means that it affects the taste and smell. So oils being seeped into paper literally means that your food is changing taste or smell. And so the leading industry coating, like in a Chipotle bowl, will last 30 to 45 minutes maximum, maybe 60 minutes at tops before it starts to stain. Our coating lasts a guaranteed minimum 7 days. Whoa. So you're getting an exponential benefit in performance. It's not just an incremental increase, it's an exponential benefit in performance. Oh, and by the only reason why we say 7 days and not longer is because we have to time out the test. So we know we can go more than 7. And so that's the benefit of performance that you get with us. And that's just one example.
Okay. So when you started out, so you had you had this prototype of an idea. Did you first start out with as a consumer product and then get into the industrial? And
Um,
how did you get your first customers?
yeah, so industrial was definitely always my main focus from inception, but no one took a 15-year-old, 16-year-old kid seriously. So I had to consumer business to keep the lights on because I didn't have investors at the time or anything like that that helped me keep running the business. So I needed to sell. So
Hmm.
that's why I started the consumer business. And then eventually, because of Shark Tank, we kept the consumer business. Um, but yeah, eventually we did get some of the first customers, and it just took pounding the pavement, getting, at all costs necessary, our foot through the door and telling the customer, whatever you need, we'll make it happen. And that meant making concessions on price. I made making concessions on other things. Our goal was first to just get into the industry. And that's still our goal today. Like, we're just trying to get into the industry, whatever industry that we tackle. Our goal is to first get make the first deal for love, and then make the second deal essentially for money. That's
Sure.
how we see it.
So were you an e-commerce first business, or like when you first started, like were you putting your products in like retail stores? How are you
We
selling it?
did we did do retail in the very beginning, and even recently we still do retail, but not it's not a primary focus. But we always had e-commerce as part of the business. Like, I think I launched the website first, Avi, with e-com, and then we went to retail, and then we went simultaneously went to retail, and then we went to industrial later on.
Okay. And how has your manufacturing evolved from the beginning? I'm assuming in the beginning it didn't have to, I mean, what was required to, I mean, I'm assuming these are like, pressurized containers. Um,
Now they are. They
okay.
weren't before, but now they are.
Can you share a little bit about how you were creating this initially? And then to me, it sounds like now you have a much bigger operation given that you're in industrial space and things like that. I mean,
Yeah,
can you
we
share a
are.
little bit about your manufacturing processes and so forth?
Yeah, we are. We definitely have evolved quite a bit. So I'm a big believer in, as you grow, becoming more vertically integrated. Um, we liked it. So DetraPel today, I'm sitting in our current facility, which is a 24,000 square foot facility, but we're moving, hopefully by the end of the year or within a year, to a 100,000 square foot facility, hopefully. So that's the plan. Um, but we are big believers in doing everything as much as possible in-house. So everything from our R&D, manufacturing, sales, marketing, distribution, everything is done internally. We pretty much don't outsource anything other than like the making of our packaging boxes that the product ships in, and that's only for consumers. And industrial, we obviously don't make like the drums or the big totes, the vats that are used in the industry. Um, but we fill them, obviously. So the point I'm trying to make is, the bigger we got and the more success we had, we reinvested everything and vertically integrated as much as possible, and we will continue to do that. And we're big believers in that business model. But when I started, it was very different. I mean, I started filling bottles by hand in little 2-ounce bottles, with like a screw top uh, and a pump spray in my mom's basement, my parents' basement. Um,
Hmm.
and so that's really what it took for the first few years. It was just making them by hand. We didn't have any equipment. Eventually we got semi-automatic equipment. Then after semi-automatic equipment, we moved to this package. So the third business model I didn't mention that we have, or third brand that we have the industrial, we have the consumer, and then we have our contract manufacturing side of the business. So we actually are the world's largest manufacturer of these pressurized containers. This is the
Hmm.
world's first and only pressurized container that can be airshipped. And the reason why is because we have a DOT exemption, because this does not use any harmful gases, no compressed gases other than air. It's just pure air.
Hmm.
And so we are the largest manufacturer of them and co-manufacturer of them in the world. We make this stuff here. We literally have 2 automated filling lines, fully automated, high-speed lines that do it all by itself now. But that's not how it started. We started by having to move from the 2-ounce trigger spray bottles to eventually these in lab units, and we were doing those by hand, semi-automatically. And then eventually, as things grew, we consolidated and vertically integrated and automated as much as possible. And I'm a firm believer that's how you go from being an e-commerce, business owner, and being a real entrepreneur. I think there's a big difference between entrepreneurship and being a business owner. And I think the sooner that people understand the difference, the better that they become in their career.
So can you expand on that a little bit more? What do you see as the difference between a business owner versus an entrepreneur? Is a difference that you are focusing more on the structure and processes of the business as opposed to really just going out there and making sales?
No, I think the fundamental core difference is, are you solving a real problem? If you're solving
Okay.
a real problem that has global scalability, you're an entrepreneur. Um, or at least you're starting or want to be an entrepreneur. I think that the main difference afterward is, how you can execute. And that's the hardest part. But starting an e-commerce business and buying and selling things on Amazon, or doing a drop shipping business on Amazon or Shopify, don't get me wrong, nothing wrong with it. Plenty of people making tons of money, more money than I'm making, but they're business owners, and those business models are fragile. And they'll never, you don't necessarily really amount to the Elon Musks of the world or the Jeff Bezos of the world if you're not solving a problem. If you're just selling things, if you're just buying and selling, and you're running a business like that, that's great. And there's nothing wrong with that by any means. But in order to be a household name, like an Apple, like a Nike, like a Tesla, whatever, like an Amazon, to be a $1 billion company or $100 million company, the reality is you need to actually solve real problems that are big, have big market application, and usually require some sort of technical expertise. And that's very different than running just a drop shipping business or an e-com business. So it just depends. Being an entrepreneur or running a company versus a business is greatly different, and depends on the person. It's not for everyone, and shouldn't be for everyone. It's sometimes the loneliest job in the world. But at the end of the day, if you are thinking that you want to really solve a groundbreaking problem that has the potential to change the world, and you think you're crazy enough to be the one that actually does that, then more than likely, you're on the path of entrepreneurship as opposed to just a business owner.
And what facilitates that? To me, it seems like, you said one thing is you need to have technical expertise, or, technical basis. When you were going from creating a few bottles to, going, having your own manufacturing process, and then the vertical integration, and, solving this problem, is the reason for your success, or the reason that you've been able to grow, is it because you had that vision of entrepreneurship in yourself, or was it that you were able to find and align with other people, who had the kind of technical expertise, engineering expertise, and so forth, that could take your vision and build on top of that?
Yeah, you definitely do not need technical knowledge or expertise to do what I'm saying, or to do what I'm doing, or to be an entrepreneur. You need to find the right team. And in fact, as you grow, and if you have shareholders, that's what they look for. They look to make sure that you as a founder are capable of scaling the team and hiring the right people to take you to the next level. That said, I think the challenge that we're kind of describing is, again, you don't need the technical expertise by any means. What you need to do is to be a problem solver, and the problem that you're working on. Like, for example, let's say you have a drop shipping. I don't know why I'm picking on drop shippers, but let's say it's a drop shipper from Amazon, and I ask you, what is the problem that you're solving? Someone's going to say, oh, well, people can't get this good from out of China or from the US at a reasonable price, and I'm getting that really unique good from China or wherever to the US, to my customer. That's hardly a problem. That's an inconvenience. That is not a problem. But a problem really is something where you have something that is preventing the growth of something else or preventing the ability to build upon something, and to solve like an actual issue that a person has that they can't move forward past, or conveniently can't move forward with, if they don't have a solution. So simply because you're selling something and people are buying it, that isn't necessarily a solution. That's just you're a convenient mechanism for someone to get something that they want. A problem is something that, you know, gravely warrants or changes how something may look, work, shape, feel, whatever, and it changes how people behave. And so, like, you know, in my position, again, with coatings for paper, let's say for food packaging, you can't physically, and even with textiles, you can't physically use those types of packaging unless you have a coating. They literally will not work like a tissue. It will fall apart. Same with textiles. If they are not chemically resistant or resistant to certain things, they will change. They will not perform. And so you need the ability to be able to solve those problems, to be able to use those goods. And that's a very different position to be in than, hey, I'm bringing a convenient way for someone to buy a product that is cool from China, for example. Again, there's nothing wrong with that. Those are great businesses to have, and sometimes they're cash cows. So I'm not by any means making a stink on those businesses. I'm just saying there is a difference, and it's important for people to know that difference, so that if an e-com business owner is interested in going much further, having that 100, 300, 400, $500 million company or plus, what's going to set them apart? It's not how many items they sell on Amazon. It's being the Amazon or something of that nature, right? So that's the goal. Is you can, if that's your interest, my point to you or to the listener is, if your interest is you want to be the Elon Musks of the world and you want to get it by using drop shipping as your medium, that's great. Earn some money and put that into something else, put those into investments that will get you to that level. If that's what you're interested in. Not everyone is.
Yeah, a lot of people are kind of like, they become business owners where they have a consistent cash flow and they're happy with that. They have a lifestyle.
And those are lifestyle businesses. You're exactly right. Those are lifestyle businesses, and there's nothing wrong with that at all. Those are great businesses to have. That's just not the path that I personally am on, or want to be on. But not everyone should want to be like me. So, and vice versa, right?
Yeah. So how do you see yourself? Like, what is your role in your company? To me, it seems like very much, you're focused on solving this problem through the product. But then, of course, the product has to be brought to market. I'm assuming you have a team that, that does the sales and marketing, and that helps with that kind of a thing. How do you see yourself as an entrepreneur, and what kind of things that you focus on the most?
Yeah, I mean, my primary goals are, bringing shareholder value, right? Because we have institutional investors, and so my main job is to create shareholder value for everyone involved, which includes myself and our employees. But how do you do that? That's by building the right team, getting product to market, and developing the business, and developing new products. So, a lot of my job is strategy and execution on getting the product to market, doing business development, and growing the right team to support where we need support. So that's really the main function of my day-to-day. Obviously, I'm a very hands-on and technical founder. So I'm very much hands-on. Like, I go on our machines and I'm the one that fixes them a lot of the times, which we're trying to hire someone for. But, like, I'm the one that, and I didn't know anything about pneumatics or electronics or PLCs or anything like that. I didn't know anything about running automation, but I had to learn on the job, on the fly, because I had no other choice. And so that's I think that's the main challenges with my job is, you have to be everywhere and nowhere at once. You have to be the person who's at the top and making big strategic initiatives, but at the same time, in my current position, which is not where I hope to be in just a few even weeks, is I have to be very hands-on on certain things that probably aren't the best use of my time, but we don't have a choice. And so that's your job as a founder, is to put out fires, right? You're constantly trying to either build a team that can put out fires or put out the fires yourself until you can hire the team to do that for you.
Yeah. And I've also read and heard that it's, a $1 million business is very different from a $10 million business. A $10 million business is very different from 100 million versus a billion, and so forth. As you're
Yeah.
growing, how are you, I'm assuming like you have business advisors or mentors or other people who can, who can guide you a little bit, I guess, more on the business
Yeah.
side of things, how to go to the next level? Because I guess you can't do that just by reading books, right? Or
No.
it would have to be a very special kind of a person who can really just grow on their own. How do you like learn and grow and business and also technical side?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, I mean, I think first and foremost, I'm a huge believer in mentorship. Huge. I've got probably 4 or 5 mentors that I talk to on a biweekly basis consistently. And over the years, those have changed. Like sometimes I've had more. I've had as many as like 7 rotating every 2 weeks. I've also had as little as like 1. But I always have a mentor, and I'm very particular on how I have mentorship, because I have mentors for very specific things. So I want a mentor who's good for like personal life stuff. I want a mentor who's good, that I can go to for business and specific parts of business. I want a mentor who can help me with like physical fitness or whatever I need. I categorize my needs and assign help both professionally and in this setting through mentors all the time. And so I think finding the right people to help you along the way is key. But there are plenty of ways to learn along the way. I mean, there are so many resources out there. I mean, yes, I think mentorship is the best way. I think finding someone who's done it and who can lend that to you is by far the best option. But that does not take away from the fact that you can definitely also, like, I learned how to do nanotechnology or polymer chemistry on Google. So, you know what I mean? Like, you can learn a lot of stuff on your own, either through reading or watching YouTube or whatever it is. And that's sometimes all it takes.
Okay. How do you find the right mentor? Or is it like the relationships that you have? I mean, I'm assuming like, being on Shark Tank and, if somebody's involved, I think that's probably a good way to get mentorship. But if you're looking for a specific kind of a mentorship, are you going out and researching and finding who's kind of the expert and, building some sort of like a relationship with them, or kind of consulting kind of a thing, like a paid relationship? How do you find mentors?
So yeah, I don't do paid because I believe that people who so I want people that don't have the time to mentor me, but choose to do it because they want to get something out of it or want to pave it to the next generation, or they believe in me and whatever. And usually those people don't need your money. So there's nothing in the world that I could pay them that's going to make it much better for them. So usually if you're getting paid as a mentor, there's the difference between like an advisor and a mentor. And I think as a mentor, if you're getting paid, you're in it for the wrong reasons. If you're a coach or you're an advisor, there's a big difference. Or like you're a formal board member or something like that, completely different. But that mentor is very, very specific. And so I think for me, again, I can only speak for what I do, but what I've done is, one, if I meet someone who I think is really cool or I can learn from, I will flat out ask. I will build a relationship. You don't just come up with a relationship. You have to build them. And coming from someone who had no relationships when I started, I built the network that I had to do. So I networked with anyone and everyone I could. I got from one person to another person. That person introduced me to someone else, and so on and so forth. And that's just how you build relationships, and you take care of the people that are close to you and help you along the way. Then that's one set of like principles that you can use to get mentors who are high value mentors. The second one is find someone. Like, think of someone that you want to get mentored by, someone realistic. Like if you want to get mentored by Mark Cuban, but you've never been outside of the city of Philadelphia, for example, you're likely not going to get to a Mark Cuban on your first try. That's okay.
Mm.
Start somewhere first. You don't need a billionaire mentor to help you when you haven't even hit 1 million yet, or 100,000 yet, or even 10,000. So start small. There's nothing wrong with evolving to new mentors as you need. So start with finding someone, whether you know them or not, digitally, and reaching out to them and just striking a conversation, trying to build a relationship. And my number one piece of advice is always, the reason why I have so many mentors, or why I have successful relationships with mentors, is because I'm always trying to bring value to them. I recognize that a person's time is the most valuable asset that they have. So for me, also as someone who's got, you know, precious time and values their time, my number one ask to mentors as to like what I can do for them is literally like, what can I do for you? What's keeping you up at night? And genuinely listen to the response. And if you even remotely have anything close to you think that could be helpful, go and share that and research that and make the connections for them. And that's how you pay people back for the help that they give to you. And that's something that I think people take for granted. And in my situation, I think I've never taken that for granted. And it's paid dividends for me. But again, I think I'm just speaking from my experience, what's worked for me. Obviously, some people might have different opinions.
Okay. Can you share a little bit about your Shark Tank experience, and are you still in relationship with the shark, and do you still have like some sort of do you talk to them, and do they advise you on your business and so forth?
Yeah, so I got onto Shark Tank. It's a very interesting story. It's long. Part of this whole mentorship discussion that I just mentioned and why I threw out Mark Cuban is because when I was 16, I cold emailed Mark Cuban looking for some advice,
Okay.
and he responded.
Wow.
So yeah, in my response
On
email to
email?
yeah, on email.
Okay. Okay.
That's all it takes. That's really all it takes. I'm only speaking from experience. The stuff that I say is truly the stuff that I do. That's why I'm using first person a lot, because I can literally speak to what I'm suggesting. I emailed Mark Cuban back in, I guess this is 2014, or yeah, it would be 2014. And he replied. And in my response to his reply, I also mentioned Shark Tank. And so he's the one that introduced me to casting producers. Those guys followed my story for about 4 years until I was finally ready to apply. And then finally I did apply, and there's a whole story, because at first I was accepted, then there was a miscommunication, so they rejected me, and then they told me a week later that, oh, they made a mistake and I was actually accepted. So there's a whole story there. The long story short, I was accepted onto the show. It was one of the best moments of my career at that time, and also one of the scariest moments of my career at the time. And I was a nervous mess, but I ended up pitching and getting one of the quicker deals in history. It only took me like 30 something minutes to secure a deal, when the average episode is actually filmed for over 90 minutes. And so had a great experience, got offers from 4 out of the 5 sharks. I took an offer, or I took a deal with Mark Cuban and Lori Greiner. Diligence starts after. And so I ended up having an interesting, conversation with their team. And ultimately, we couldn't come to deal terms. And so mutually kind of decided that it just wasn't the best fit. And on their front, they saw some inconsistencies as well. So we actually did not end up closing. And that ended up being a blessing in disguise, because I got all the publicity that I wanted from the show, with no equity, giving up any equity. Now, granted, I probably would have preferred at the time to have that kind of investor and relationship, but it worked out just fine. I've stayed in communication occasionally with them, but we're not active in any relationship.
Okay. Can you share a little bit about your team, and how big is your team, and what are the different areas that you have in your business?
Yeah, so we're about 17 right now, plus minus 1 or 2. We're constantly letting people go or hiring. If it's the wrong fit, we like to let go pretty quick. But we're looking to hopefully grow to 20 by the end of the year. And what was the second question? Part of that question? Sorry.
Well, let me ask you this. I mean, you said that you're always looking for the right fit. What do you look for in an employee when you're hiring?
The main thing is attitude to the job. We want someone who will get shit done at any cost, essentially. Like we want to make sure that we're moving the company forward. There's a lot that's going on. We're a very small team for the size of the operation that we run. It's pretty insane to have this lean of a company.
Hmm.
And so because of that, we have to be firing on all cylinders all the time. And that's the challenge is, if someone doesn't get that, we can't afford to be behind the wheel. We just have too much going on, too many customer relationships, too many things that are hinging on the success of the business to be relaxed about our progress. And so if we're not meeting our KPIs, if we're not meeting our goals, I have no problem moving on and we'll help the individual who we have to let go. We'll help them until they find their next job if that's what it takes. But if you're not the right fit, you're not the right fit.
Okay. So you said 17 people, right? 17. Wow.
Yeah,
So
plus minus.
that's really lean for you have three different areas of business that you manage.
Like
That's
I said, we're very lean. We're a little too lean, to be honest.
wow. Okay. So
We're
how many
working.
hours do you work? How many hours do you work in?
I don't track them because if I did, I'd probably shoot myself.
Okay.
No, I mean,
So
it's very easy to put in 100-hour work weeks. So on that note, by the way, I love what I do. So to me, it's not work.
hmm,
I think also early on, I realized that if I could work double the amount of time that most people do, I'd be twice far ahead. So to me, and I heard this from another amazing entrepreneur when I was in college, he said, if he would wake up and start working from 7 a.m. all the way till 7 p.m. and then take like a quick break. I mean, he could take quick breaks in between, but have time for whatever else he needed and then work again, wake up earlier or whatever. If he could work 16 hours a day, essentially was what he was saying,
hmm,
he'd have twice the amount of work weeks than anyone
hmm,
else did by the end of the year. And that
hmm,
really stuck with me because I always was a workhorse, but I realized I also can't sit still. So it's just my nature,
hmm,
my personality. But I quickly realized that me, if I could work 2-3 times the amount, well, technically I couldn't work 3 times, but 2 times the amount of everyone else, or 2.5 times the amount of everyone else, 2.25, I'd be that much further ahead of them by the end of the year. And so it's very frequent to work 70, 80,
So
90, 100-hour work weeks.
so what drives you? Is it really I mean to be able to be very very motivated to get up and to put in all these hours, is your goal really money? Is it really about making a difference? Is it really fame, as being like this amazing entrepreneur who created this a great business and product? What actually drives you to be able to put in all this work? Because there's definitely a cost to it, right? Like you're not able to, while you're working, you're not able to do, maybe you're not spending time with your family or you're
It's
not
all about
having fun.
sacrifice. Yeah, it's all about sacrifice and prioritization. Um, so first and foremost, I'll say, I think that for me, again, for me personally, I'm just a very driven and ambitious person, and I'm very headstrong in what I want. But I also just care, like to me, similar to anyone who knows David Goggins, I just dare to be excellent. I want to be the best version of me that I possibly can. And for me, I know where my skills lie, and my skills lie in what I do. And so I'm constantly trying to be the best possible person or entrepreneur that I can be. I think money comes as a result. I think money is important for everything in life, but I don't necessarily say that money is a driving factor. Like it's important. It's very important because with money comes influence, comes ability to change the world. Unfortunately, that's the world we live in. Whether or not people want to admit it, money drives a lot of decisions in the U.S. especially, and in the entire world. It's not just the U.S. But I love the fact that like I'm in control of my destiny. And for the things that I want, the freedom that I want in life, I see a very clear road to get there. And so I'm very just motivated to drive 120 miles an hour on that road to get to the destination where I'm going. as quick as possible. I think money is a result of all those things. It's not the driving force or the driving factor. At the end of the day, I really think what we're doing is world changing, but more important than that, I think we can make the grand impact that we want to make if we get to that point, to that level. So that's, I think, probably the main motivation. And again, I'm just built different. Like, to me, I'm built different. I care about this stuff way too much. I care about my impact, my career, and my ability to make a change for the world, make a change for my family and for future generations, but also for people who have very similar stories. I came from nothing. I had nothing. My parents were immigrants. We got divorced when I was 2. I grew up in literal poverty. Like, I had nothing. And so I know what it means to come from nothing, and I never want to be in that position again. And I never want to be in the position that my parents were in while I was growing up, where I had to see how they work to make ends meet. That's just not what I want. And so for me, or what I want for my family, for my kids, or whatever. And so again, that's kind of like the monetary side of things, but the fundamental, actual driving motivator is the freedom. I want the ability to do anything I want at any moment, whenever I want, however or wherever I am. And so that's what I care about. I want the ability to be able to make as much impact as possible and to motivate the next generation. And while doing all of that, have the freedom to do it however I want, whenever I want.
Definitely, that's definitely very true. Now we're going to move on to our rapid fire segment because we're running out of time. I would love to continue talking to you, but one book recommendation for entrepreneurs, and why?
Oh shoot, there are a couple I would say. What stage of an entrepreneur?
Anything that you that you would recommend? I guess mostly for starting, anyone starting out, I guess.
Okay, so I'm going to give an untraditional answer. If you're just starting out, I would listen to Never Finish by David Goggins. And the reason why is because if you can employ that kind of mindset of the never give up mindset, and you're a highly motivated individual, you will find the solution. You will find the answer to whatever you're doing.
Okay. An innovative product or idea in the current business landscape that you feel excited about?
I'm going to say my own. I think artificial intelligence and a few other things are really exciting. But fundamentally, I think the stuff that we're building is just as exciting for me. I think the stuff that I'm doing really has the potential to change the world because it helps potentially redefine chemical industry, which is one of the largest industries in the world. And it touches everything that you can think of: your shirt, your glasses, the desk you're sitting at, all of that has a chemical coating, all of it. And so knowing that our chemistries, a lot of the chemistries that are used are carcinogenic or whatever, and I have the ability to make an impact and get rid of that, that's huge for me.
Awesome. A business or productivity tool or a productivity tip?
Productivity tip I'll give is, I don't do this anymore. I did this in high school. Now I use digital calendars and stuff, but get intimate with a calendar, with a task list, a priority list, and a calendar, and ensure that you have it written down. And in high school, I did it all physical calendar where I would literally write, like, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z for 30 minutes. And I would, give myself an additional 15 minutes of what I normally would have on purpose so that I have that buffer time. Lunch is written down when I'm having it. At one point I got really into that, and I was even giving bathroom breaks in there. But the point being that you write everything that you have to do in a day down, and you check it off the list one by one. As simple as it sounds, it's super impactful. And now I do that with a digital calendar. I prefer it to be in a physical calendar, but because I'm always on the move, it's tough to be with a physical calendar at times. Or a physical task list. But that's one of my biggest productivity tips.
Okay. Final question. Best business advice you ever received or you would give to other entrepreneurs?
There are a few pieces of advice or a few things I've heard that are phenomenal. The first one I would say is it's never too early or too late to start. But starting this is the advice I would give, is starting sooner is always better. The soonest you can start, even as a kid, it's the best time to start, because especially at when you're younger, you have a lot less responsibility. You don't have especially if you're in high school or even earlier, college, even in most cases, you don't have a mortgage, you don't have a car, you don't have a lot of things that you have to pay for. You don't have a family, you don't have kids to take care of, you don't have expenses. That's the time to push and grind out as much as you can. And it's only after then that you can, bear the fruits of those labors. But it's much easier to do that and fail and learn at an early age than it is at a later stage. And on that same token, I would say another piece of advice is you don't fail, you learn.
Definitely. Well, David, those were all the questions that I had. Thank you so much for your time today. I know you're very busy. So thank you so much for taking some time out for me and sharing your story, very unique story. I was a little bit surprised when I read about you because you're so young.
Yeah.
So very, very inspiring. And
Thank you.
yeah, thank you so much. And I'm sure listeners will find a lot of value out of this. So thanks again for the opportunity. Really appreciated it. And thanks again for joining me today at Trep Talks.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.